In this installment of Arrays in JavaScript, we're going to add in the input so that we can actually start to play our game. So I'm going to create my paragraph to hold the input, and now I'll put an input here. And with this input, we'll put an ID on it. And the ID will be simply input, and then in the input, or after the input, we'll have a button, and then the button will be, we'll just put submit on it. So if we save this and take a look, we can see now we have text and an input there. If we want to do some styling, make it bigger, etc., adjust the display, the button, the font, that's all the CSS that you can dive into to make it more aesthetic for your purposes. So we have the game map, we have the output. Now let's go grab the input and the button. So let input equal document. Well, let's try and type right. No, document dot query selector, and this time it will be simply input. Now, if we have more than one input, we have to do it this way. Otherwise, I could just simply query the input, since I do technically only have one, which is what I am going to do. With the button, I'll just simply go document.query selector. This time I'll just grab my button. So I could have done that for the input as well, but it is what it is. Now, one thing that I do like to do here when we're doing this kind of activity is I like to make the input, so when the page comes to focus, the cursor is in it. So if we look here, I load the page. To start typing, I have to click in that input, and that, especially when we're testing, gets to be a pain. Now if I click here and go into that page, we'll see that automatically that is now the focus and the cursor is in it, ready to type. So that is pretty slick. So I think that's a nice item that we can add. Now we'll do our submit button, we'll do our add event listener, and we'll listen for a click, and then with that we'll call play game, comma, false. What we can also do is we can listen for the key up handler, so that if someone types something in, instead of having to click on the button, they certainly can, but they could also just hit the return or enter key, so we could listen for that key, which has a key code of 13. So that would be an additional option that we could do. So I'm just going to put that in right now because, well, I like it. So key commands are always tied to the window. They're not tied to elements. So then this time we'll be looking for a key up. And even though it is 2 words, it is not camel cased. So that's important. And do key handler, well, comma, false. I think I might have to do something about the kind of helping. That's not being very helpful right now for my because when I'm typing things, it's coming up and giving me all that information about what it is. It's starting to get a little bit of visually problematic. All right, so I'm going to go down after the map stuff, and this is where I'm going to start building out my functions. So function, key handler, and now we need to specify the event, so we can use EVT or EVENT. All of those are common ways of referencing it. I like E to be my shorthand to reference the event that I have listened for. So now I say if the event that triggered this, E, so we're passing that as a parameter from this function, and its key code, this is camel cased, is equal to the number 13, not 14, not 134, but 13. So if it is 13, then we want to call play game. Now we haven't made play game yet. We have two ways to call play game. So now let's call play game and simply be function play game. And inside of play game, first off, we'll just go log and say game on. So let's save this and give it a run. So if I click on submit, we see game on. Now if I type some stuff here and hit the enter key, it kicks out game on. So we can see that the code that we've typed in is now working, and we're getting to the point that we can start to play. So now that our game is playing, what we want to do is analyze the input that has been provided. So to do that, I'm going to say if input value, so we're looking for the value of that, triple equal sign, and I'm going to start out with West. I like to go in the kind of the circle of arrow keys corresponding to their key codes because that's how I always think of it. So we begin with West as our first entity. And so if we say West, let's tell our map location. So if we look, we're starting here, if we want to go west, our map location was 4, we want to go down to 3. So that tells us that we are subtracting 1. So to do that, map location minus equals 1. Else, if input that value is triple equal to north, well, with that we want to go up. So if we look here, 4 becomes 1, so that's taken away 3. 5 becomes 2, that's taken away 3. 3 becomes 0, taken away 3. So that tells us that if the input value is north, then map location is minus equal 3. So we're taking 3 from whatever the current location was when we go north. Else, if input value, and I was just thinking, you know, I might want to just copy paste some of this because it's kind of rinse and repeat. And then in the process of thinking that, I committed a whole bunch of typos. But now hopefully I can do it correctly. So if west is subtracting 1, east is going to add 1. So now I use plus equal 1, not hash, but 1. And then we say else if input dot value triple equal sign south. So if we're going to the south, then we need to tell our map location to add 3 to it. And finally, what we should say is else, and in this final else, what we really want is to be able to reference a message. So I kind of need a way to store what is the game message. So what is this message that I am telling the player here? So to that end, I am going to add an additional variable. And again, I like to have my variables before my functions. So I'll say let game message be equal to, in this case, we'll just start out with an empty string. Now, I'll say game message is equal to I did not understand what you said. Okay. So that now updates the game message. And then what we want to do is we want to display that. So what I'm going to do is call display. And display is going to be a function. And this is where I'm going to start doing all of my rendering. We'll end up moving this backpack stuff in there and going nuts with that as well. So now we could update output, inner HTML, and we can now set it equal to, and use a template literal, and I want to specify and show the map location. So map location, and then after that I want to specify the location, and then my well, let's just start with that and see what we get when we start moving around. So if we save that, we're here north, and we can see it says I entered a dark cave. Now I did forget to point out that between files I did update my location information here. Now we can update the location information here and add the game message in, and we could be saying, game message, is map location right there, or what we can do is we can put this game message, and I'm going to put in a line break. This is why we're using inner HTML instead of using text content, so I can pass in these breaks and other HTML information that I so desire. And then I'm going to say game message, close curly. So I just want to check one thing. Okay, I did put periods on all of those. Let me put a period here, so if we do fail that. Okay. Now if I were to say gobbledygook, it says, I do not understand what you said. Okay, now let's try again and say south. So what we can see is we've got a few things going on here that after we're updating it with the text, it's not clearing things that were there before. So we do need to do a little bit of housekeeping after we display the first time, and just say game message is then once again equal to an empty string. So now let's see what happens here. Gobbledygook. Okay, and now let's try, it'd be nice to clear out the input each time too. And now it got rid of that, but now if we're going north F, okay, that didn't work. What if I say capital north? Does that work? Well, maybe spell it correctly. Nope, does not understand that, and it's not clearing it, but it is still keeping track of what is our current game location. So after we do that, we might want to go input value is equal to empty string. So now we can go gobbledygook, return, don't know what you said, east. We see, fence, okay. All right, so we've updated the text, we've cleaned things up, we've done a couple of different housekeeping features, but we want to update the screen visuals and move that gray box around, just because we don't have to. We're probably going to get rid of this map later on, but while we're developing this, it's nice to be able to see as we move around where we are. And it's also a chance to learn a little bit about HTML collections. I'm just putting a comment here, update screen visuals. Later on, we might instead use pictures and display pictures instead of just the gray box. But what we want to do is we want to remove gray from any elements, any divs that are there, and then assign the gray to it using the same line of code that we did here. We will be reusing that again. So I can go copy that, paste that here. But before I say that, well, here, let's just see what happens and watch. And now if I go north and then go east, south, so we can see, well, it's showing where we've been. That's kind of cool. We could have two colors, one tracking where we've been and one where we currently are. It's not a bad idea. But if I want to get rid of gray from all the items on here, I could use a for loop and cycle through that, but we already have access to all of these divs. But it's an HTML collection, so we can't just set the class name of it or remove the class list from it, because we can't, it doesn't process them as array elements, because it's an HTML collection which is like an array but isn't an array. But JavaScript allows us to cast it as an array, so we can say array from map mark. Now remember, map mark up here, that is where we grabbed all of the divs inside our game map. So all of these divs, that is what we're accessing here. And we're creating an array of those divs. And now instead of a for loop, I'm going to use a for each method. And then I will say function. So I could call a specific function, but instead I'm using what's called an anonymous function. So I'm now just declaring what I want to have happen here. So this is, it's a little bit cleaner than creating yet one more function and then calling it. So we could do this with more things in our project, but this is a case where this would be a standard practice of how we would do this. And now in this case we have element. If we think back to the key code, we use E. We're using it in the same manner. So it's the item that we're referencing. That's how we do it. So in this case, E, I mean, I could go event and event in the same way that here we're referring to that element. Or we could just use E in both cases. Stylistically, you'll find references to both when you look at other people's code, and you have to use the style guide of the company you're working for or the style that you prefer to use. So now I'll say class list dot remove, and so it removes gray if it's on it. So now let's save that and let's see what happens. So now I'm here. If I go over here and go south, moves it over. Now if I go west, moves it over, and if I go west again, oh, that's interesting. Let's go south, and let's go south one more time, because west, remember at 6, going west takes 1 away, that's why it went over to 5. We don't want screen wrapping here, but now if I go south again, we'll see we got an error, because now we're trying to set a class on something that we can't because we've gone too far. We've effectively gone to location, let's see, it'd be 9, 10, 11. So yeah, that's really not working. So in the next installment, we're going to figure out how to lock the movement so that we can only move within the map. So we will, when we run into a boundary, we will provide feedback to the player that they can't go that way.